Hey everybody, this is Justin from Black Module Studio, bringing you a new Unity Basics tutorial. Before we get started, I'd like to mention that I've recently started up a Patreon campaign in order to raise support for this new series of tutorial videos. If you enjoy this video and would like to see the series continue, please consider heading over to Patreon and pledging. In this video, I will be covering components in Unity. Components provide additional functionality to the game object. Without them, there would be no functionality or graphics being rendered. In the previous video, we learned that game objects are containers for components, and they all have a transform component. Since an empty game object, which is one that only has a transform component attached, is pretty dull, let's go ahead and learn how to attach a component to a game object. There are a variety of ways to add components to a game object. In fact, most actions in Unity have several ways to be performed, allowing the developer to do things in a way that is most comfortable for them. The most basic way to add a component to a game object is with the menu at the top of the Unity editor. Go ahead and select a game object, then click the component menu. In this menu, there are several options. For now, we will select Mesh Filter. This will add a mesh filter to the selected game object. Now we can see the mesh filter component in the inspector view. The next way to add a component to a game object is from the inspector. If you select the game object, below all of the attached components there is an Add Component button. This will open up a menu similar to the one at the top of the editor. Let's go ahead and add a mesh renderer component. The last way I will cover for adding a component to a game object is a rather intuitive approach. But first, I'll create a script to illustrate the point. We'll just create a C# script and call it example. And in here, we'll just do something simple and we'll create a public variable. It'll be just a boolean. Call it myBool. And then we'll create a private variable, integer, and we'll call it myInt. All we have to do is drag the script from the project panel over to the inspector panel while the game object is selected. Great! Now that we're able to add components to a game object, let's learn how to interact with those components. In the inspector panel, we can see that our components have several properties available. Let's go ahead and select a mesh for the mesh filter component. Just click the small circle icon to the right of the field and select an available mesh. These meshes are Unity default meshes, but we can create our own in external programs such as Maya or Blender or even in script. Now we can see that the mesh property has a mesh assigned to it. In the scene view and game view, we can see our mesh, but it is a magenta color and difficult to see the shape. In the console, we can also see some information. This info describes our problem. We need to assign a material to our mesh renderer component. Just open up the Materials tab and click the circle icon like before. I will select the default diffuse material. Notice how we now have a shader displayed below our other components. We can edit shader properties here. If we open up our script and add a public variable and a private one, we can see something else that Unity does. Public variables and scripts are displayed in the inspector panel, but private ones are not. Also, depending on the variable's data type, we have different ways to interact with it. Notice how our bool is a checkbox. Another thing to notice is that the data is serialized, so if you change a value in the inspector, then that is the value that it is initialized as, regardless of if you initialized it to something else in the script. We can now add components to our game objects, as well as interact with those components. But what if we want to remove a component? Fortunately, this is very simple. Each component has a menu that has a Remove Component option. Simply click this gear icon to open it. There are several contextual options available, but all components, other than the transform component, have the ability to remove itself from the game object. There are also options to copy components, and either paste those components or to paste their values onto another component. Keep in mind that to paste the values from one component to another, they must be the same type of component. Well, that covers our tutorial on components in Unity. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. Subscribe to the channel to easily see when the next tutorial video is posted. Also, please consider supporting the creation of these Unity tutorials by becoming a patron. As always, thank you for watching.